Hello again, Buckeye Nation. It's time for the Silver Bullet Podcast. I'm Michael Citro.
And I'm Chip Minnich.
Chip, it's been a couple weeks since we talked. It is the off season, but the Ohio State football program does not sleep, as you know. Things are
no,
always
it does
happening.
not.
And so we've got plenty to talk about this week on the Silver Bullets Podcast. We are going to, of course, come back and talk about the spring game, and then we'll probably go monthly for the off season, the rest of the off season. And but it's good to touch base. It's good to kind of keep up with what's going on. We kind of keep our schedule fluid. That way, if there's a lot going on, we can talk about it. And if there's not that much going on, we don't have to talk about it. I don't believe the last time we spoke that Tate Martell had been cleared to play for Miami this year.
I think you're correct. And I wish Tate Martell nothing but the best at Miami. And we'll see what kind of career he has with the Hurricanes. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, so Tate Martell officially a Hurricane, which means, of course, that he is eligible to transfer from Miami at any time.
Yeah, well, let's hope that he's finally found a home.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll be fine. But he's got my understanding is he's got two other guys he's competing with for this the starting job. But if he does the kinds of things he did at Ohio State, he should win that job, I would think.
You would think, and I guess, for a program that traditionally has prided itself on stellar quarterback play, you think about, guys like Jim Kelly, Bernie Kosar, even though he had kind of a checkered professional career, Vinny Testaverde, I mean, he had a long career. All these storied names. The Miami Hurricanes, their quarterback play has not been necessarily anything to write home about. So I certainly believe Tate Martell has a legitimate chance to win that starting job. And the good thing is that the Miami-Florida game has been moved up to week 0. So it's actually going to be, I believe, August 24th, which is, I think it might be the only game. I mean, with no disrespect to, I'm sure there's a game in Hawaii also that night, but a game that the average college football fan can watch during the day or evening, whatever time it winds up being televised.
Trial by fire for Tate right off the bat, and as we know, quarterbacks that go down and face SEC competition usually do pretty good.
That is true.
So, all right. So let's start with some of the more recent news to come out of Ohio State. Just today, we reported at the Ozone.net about unfortunately another season-ending injury to Cameron Babb, another serious knee injury they're calling it. And Cameron Babb, the receiver, he's just not been able to stay healthy, and it's a shame. But this is why you have the recruiting numbers that Ohio State has, is so that you can go out and get guys that are really good players. And if something happens to them, it's not a devastating blow to the program. It is a devastating blow to the kid, though.
Without a doubt. And my heart goes out to this young man, because I may be mistaken. I know this is the second year in a row that he has sustained injuries while at Ohio State that have knocked him out for the season. I want to say I read that he had a knee injury in high school as well. So, as you said, the devastating news to Cameron Babb, psychologically as well as physically, you have to kind of start to wonder if it's ever going to happen. This is the kind of thing where you have to kind of worry about quality of life when it comes to these kind of injuries. Is it really worth it to keep playing? So my fingers are crossed for him, but we'll just have to wait and see what the medical team at Ohio State suggests to Cameron Babb and see what the future holds for him.
Yeah, at least he's getting better health care than I probably am. And obviously not the same injury to him as what Johnny Dixon went through, but at least there's a good role model for him in Johnny Dixon, who was plagued by knee problems for years and then eventually overcame them and had a pretty good career at Ohio State.
That's a really good point. That is probably the one person that if I'm Cameron Babb that I'm reaching out to, or vice versa. If I'm Johnny Dixon, I'm reaching out to Cameron Babb to extend words of optimism and basically the idea of hang in there. Things will work out one way or another. That kind of a mentality, because Johnny Dixon, granted not the same type of injuries, but he thought long and hard about giving up football, and he stuck with it, and he's on the verge of becoming a professional football player as a result of it. I'm not sure if Cameron Babb has that same good fortune, but Johnny Dixon would certainly be an ideal person to talk to about just kind of the value of perseverance.
Absolutely. So our best go out to Cameron Babb, and hopefully it's nothing that he can't overcome. Hopefully the structure of the knee is still such that he can get back on the field if that's what he chooses to do, or certainly that more importantly that he can live a normal life and be able to walk when he's 20 or 30 years older than he is now.
I completely agree.
Some of us aren't walking too good, and we didn't play football.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's as I said earlier, that the quality of life. I mean, at some point, hopefully there are people in Cameron Babb's ear that are. I'm not suggesting that football isn't worth it, but hopefully there are people that once he is given the diagnosis about what is the best long-term decision, regardless of whether it involves football or not, that hopefully that there are some people around him that are advising him to think of the long-term ramifications on his knee and what might be the best decision.
Yeah. So other recent news, just a few days old, is that LaChristian Smith transferring from Ohio State, and that's I guess a bit of a numbers game, maybe not that big of a surprise, but at the same time, you hate to see a redshirt freshman leave the program when there's still obviously a lot of time ahead of him. Maybe he's been surpassed by some of the incoming true freshmen or something that has caused him to make that decision. But he's one of those guys that is. If he leaves the program, or he has left the program, then it certainly helps Ohio State get to the numbers that they were going to get to, and this is the kind of attrition you have every spring.
Precisely, and in a similar vein, wish Blue Smith nothing but the best. I kind of, he's going to be one of these guys that no matter where he winds up, it's always going to be kind of what might have been, because even though he redshirted last year, I recall his recruitment, the stories that I read were kind of a back and forth between Blue Smith and the coaching staff. From what I read, that there were concerns from Blue Smith that, yes, he played wide receiver, but he was concerned that the coaching staff was eventually going to try and move him to tight end. And, who knows what transpired behind closed doors. And but I'm inclined to believe what you said a few moments ago, that it might have been a numbers game. When you read some of the different things in terms of the few practices that have taken place, that like players like Garrett Wilson, who's a true freshman coming in and already starting to turn heads, and last year, Chris Olave, who was a classmate of Blue Smith's, he was able to shine in the limited opportunities that he had later in the season. So he's already kind of, moving up the depth chart. So it might have been, like you said, like the idea of, all right, well, these other guys are kind of passing me on the depth chart. I'm not sure what my long-term position is going to be here at Ohio State. So maybe he's thinking, I have an opportunity to play earlier elsewhere. So we don't know where elsewhere is at the moment. At least I don't. But I wish him nothing but the best, and certainly understand that the opportunity to play football at a major college, is something that very few people are given the opportunity to do, and he probably wants to make sure he seizes that opportunity. Unfortunately, it's not going to be at Ohio State.
Yeah, it's every year you have kids that are good players because Ohio State's recruiting classes are very strong. That for whatever one reason or another they can't quite crack the depth chart highly so that they know they're going to be getting playing time, and that is something that you can sort of read the tea leaves on in the spring. And if you're too far down the depth chart in the spring and guys maybe behind you are passing you, guys behind you in terms of time in the program are passing you, that is a sign that if you want to play and you want to get playing time, maybe it's time to check out some of your other options. And of course, famously, that's what Joe Burrow did. Joe Burrow has aspirations of playing in the NFL someday, and he wasn't going to get that opportunity at Ohio State, so he went to LSU. And I think he's done pretty well for himself in his first year as a starter, and he's going to be back. So now you've got Blue Smith, who is hopefully going to land somewhere good that they'll use him, and he'll have an opportunity to try to perform to a level where he can play at the next level. So it's not something where you would ever wish the kid any ill will. This is just a simple numbers game at times, and you would ideally love for every player that gets recruited to be true to their school, but that's just not realistic when you have so much riding on it in terms of your future, and especially when you're talking about professional sports where so small of a percentage of the players that play college football will get that opportunity at the next level.
I think you hit it right on the head. Every one of these young men at Ohio State, they certainly want the opportunity to play at the professional level. And Blue Smith, I'm not sure what his rationale is, but I'm sure he kind of figured now is the time to, if I'm going to make a move, now's the perfect time to do so.
Yeah, I mean, he's got time to get into another program, learn an offense, and work his way onto the field. And that's something that, probably if you're going to do it, you want to do it earlier in your career rather than later. And of course, and then you don't have quite as much time to lay down film for the scouts to look at and to make your mark on college football. So good luck to Blue, and it helps Ryan Day reach his target number of scholarship players. So kind of a win-win in the end. Chip, why don't we turn our attention to some other more recent news? As the Buckeyes come in and they're new Buckeyes come in and they have to earn their way onto the team by losing their black stripes. And a guy you might have heard of just lost his black stripe and became a full-fledged Buckeye, a guy named Justin Fields.
Yeah, I think I've heard of him maybe in passing, but in all seriousness, that's a good sign for Justin Fields, obviously, but for Ohio State overall, because that means that he's considered somebody who can be depended upon in game action. Not that there was ever any doubt that was going to take place, but I think the fact that his teammates, whoever is his designated big brother on the team, because I believe that's how the team comes to that decision when the black stripe is ready to be removed. The fact that Justin Fields has shown enough in 5 or 6 practices, and whatever the winter workouts, that he certainly has earned the respect of his teammates is a very positive thing.
Absolutely. So Fields is a highly prized recruit and a highly prized transfer, obviously out of Georgia. He joins a small group from the 2019 Black Stripe Removal Club. Don't want to shortchange walk-on Darryl Sinclair. He's a cornerback out of Solon. He lost his as well. So those two, along with Ben Schmiesing, Cade Kashersky, and Logan Hittle, all losing their black stripes in the calendar year 2019. So congrats to all of them. Let's stick with Justin Fields, though, because he's kind of an important cog in the machine should he earn that starting position. Let's talk a little bit, Chip, about what the offense is going to look like in 2019 with Justin Fields as the probable starter. What do you see from the Ryan Day we don't know how much of Ryan Day we saw the last couple of years. We saw certainly quite a bit of Ryan Day, but we saw quite a bit of Urban Meyer and and also some Kevin Wilson in there. So what are we going to see now with new quarterbacks coach coming over from or passing game coordinator coming over from Oklahoma State, and Ryan Day at the helm? What are we going to see?
Purely speculative, simply because we're several months from actual game competition, and the spring game, even though it's coming up on April 13th, you usually don't show everything that you want to do in the fall. It's just more of an opportunity to let fans in Ohio Stadium and get your players out of Ohio Stadium, hopefully without any injuries taking place. But your question about Justin Fields, I believe, and this is the speculation part, I believe that the Ohio State offense is going to be more in tune with what Ohio State ran with J.T. Barrett than they did last season with Dwayne Haskins. And that's not to take a shot at Justin Fields as a passer, because he is highly thought of in that regard. But by all accounts from Tony Gerdeman and Tom Orr, who have been at some of the practices where the media is allowed to attend, the idea of Justin Fields having tremendous mobility, that maybe the zone read is not entirely dead within Columbus, Ohio. How is that? I think the idea that Justin Fields, if not the zone read, the idea that if he were to drop back to pass and his options were not open, that he might take advantage of his mobility to not only keep plays alive, but possibly turn upfield and gain positive yardage. So that's where I think I'm going to go into 2019 with Justin Fields as the probable starter, and the offense looking more J.T. Barrett-like than Dwayne Haskins. By the same token, I believe one of the credits that I would give to Ryan Day is that he plays to the strengths of the talent that he has. And Matthew Baldwin, who Ryan Day recruited, is not nearly as mobile as Justin Fields. So I think that the offense would look more similar to Dwayne Haskins than it would under J.T. Barrett.
I agree with you. I wonder though if it will look more like a J.T. Barrett offense. Obviously, it'll look more like a J.T. Barrett offense with Justin Fields than a Dwayne Haskins offense. But which will it look more like? Will it look more like a J.T. Barrett run offense at Ohio State, or will it look more like a Braxton Miller run offense at Ohio State?
I'm going to believe that it's going to be more of a J.T. Barrett, and this is not meant to slight Braxton Miller. But and we've never really talked about this, so this is just kind of one of the things that always perplexed me when Urban Meyer was the head coach his first year in 2012. I thought Urban Meyer and Tom Herman ran Braxton Miller excessively. Mm-hmm. And I remember there were a lot of people, even asking Urban Meyer, how many times did you want to run Braxton Miller? And it wasn't until well after the 2012 season had come and gone, a few years after that Urban Meyer acknowledged that Braxton Miller was all they had offensively. So that was kind of almost by necessity. Mm-hmm. But I think J.T. Barrett, the fact that during that 2017 season, you could see some of the influence of Ryan Day with the passing game on J.T. Barrett. Granted, Barrett was not the same type of passer that Dwayne Haskins, but I think that the passing game principles that Ryan Day incorporated, you could definitely see marked improvement from J.T. Barrett as a passer that last year. So I just believe it's going to be more of a J.T. Barrett-like offense than Braxton Miller, but I may certainly be mistaken.
Well, the reason I ask, it's not so much of the amount of running that they'll ask him to do. And let's face it, there were games when J.T. Barrett ran the ball 10 times more than the lead tailback. It was not unusual for Urban Meyer to fall in love with the quarterback run and to the detriment of the team. Let's say, for example, You go back to the Big Ten championship game against Michigan State with 2 short yardage plays that Carlos Hyde doesn't touch the ball.
Right.
That I think that one sticks in about every Buckeye fan's craw, that they didn't roll Hyde in that situation. But the reason I ask is because I've seen a few of Oklahoma State's games last year and the year before. Mike Yurcich is an offensive mind that I think just the style of play would seem like it might mirror the Braxton Miller offense more than the JT Barrett offense. And there's not huge differences, but there certainly was a lot more zone read with JT because he was much better at it than Braxton. And it seemed like there was a lot more quarterback draws and things like that with Braxton Miller. And I think that Justin Fields may be, I mean, he's certainly fast, probably faster than JT, bigger than Braxton or JT, and he might be a guy who they would maybe play more in that role of he's a drop back passer. We're going to get him some runs in different ways than JT Barrett got his runs. But again, it's just speculation. All we can do is look back at the history and see what might be coming. But I mean, a player like Justin Fields could prompt coaches to just create an entirely new type of offense.
And something else to kind of contemplate is the fact that Ohio State, they are losing wide receivers like Paris Campbell. We talked about Johnny Dixon earlier, Terry McLaurin. So it may be out of necessity that Ohio State, at least in the beginning of the season, while the offense is still trying to kind of get acclimated to each other, that Justin Fields may be tasked with doing more as a ball carrier versus passing, because KJ Hill is the most experienced wide receiver coming back, and I have no doubt that he will be the primary target for Justin Fields this coming season. But the other wide receivers, we mentioned Chris Olave earlier, Ben Victor's coming back. They definitely need to step up.
Austin Mack,
and he'll be back, hopefully healthy and ready to go. So getting those wide receivers on the same page with a new quarterback, and let's throw in the fact that a still developing offensive line. When I say developing in the sense that team chemistry, I mean Ohio State they're going to have, without knowing who it will be yet, they will have a new center. They will have a new right tackle. They will have possibly a new left guard, and we're not sure on the long-term health of Thayer Munford, possibly a new left tackle. So I mean, right there, 4 out of 5 new offensive linemen. Going back to your premise, the idea that Justin Fields may be kind of thrust into that all-important role of kind of carrying the offense for the first few games while everyone else is trying to get settled.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're just going to have to wait and see how it all shakes out. We might get a few clues in the spring game coming up. We probably won't get a lot, but we might get a clue or two as to how that's going to go. I'm personally feeling pretty good about the starting 3 receivers. The second 3 may need to step up a little bit to get to where the team was last year. Obviously, we talked about the guys who left. There's really no like for like when it comes to Paris Campbell, but there are some speedsters that are young and raw and could step in and fill in nicely. But you look at an Austin Mack, a KJ Hill, a Ben Victor, a Chris Olave. You're looking at some pretty solid returning players that have gotten some snaps, and then you're just hoping some guys that didn't play as much can get in there and provide that depth that Ohio State had last year. So
I completely agree.
Let's stick with the offense for a minute. Let's talk about a guy who it seems like every media outlet is talking about these days, and that's Demario McCall. He is a guy who obviously has shown just absolute flashes of brilliance when he's been on the field. I know that fans have been calling for more of Demario. since he was getting garbage time carries and ripping off 30 and 40-yard runs. But here's a guy who Tony Alford, the running backs coach, says he can be an every down back. He's not necessarily just a scat back, just a Darren Sproles type. What do you see for Demario's role in 2019? Obviously, now with Mike Weber gone, it seems J.K. Dobbins is going to get more carries, be more of a workhorse running back. But every team now, or every major elite team has multiple running backs for various reasons. They want to change a pace guy. They want maybe guys that have different skill sets, but they also want to keep their starters fresh. So they want to get fresh legs in there. How do you see Demario sharing carries, and what do you think his role is in 2019?
Well, I certainly think he's going to play a more prominent role than he has up until this point in his Ohio State career. I like that Darren Sproles comparison. Having had the pleasure of watching Demario McCall in high school, just as a local player in the Cleveland area, he was certainly electrifying every time he touched the ball at the high school level. I certainly think he has the potential to carry the ball more out of the backfield, but maybe I'm mistaken. I think he is going to certainly get his share of carries, but I think he is also going to be the type of player that Ohio State's going to try and utilize him as a receiver out of the backfield and try and create mismatches, try to get him lined up on a linebacker or a safety, trying to cover him out of the backfield. And Ohio State took full advantage of that against Michigan with Devin Bush, who certainly is not lacking for speed, and Ohio State was able to isolate McCall on Bush and get a very big gain in that game. So I certainly think he's more than just a third down back per se, but I think he's kind of that jack of all trades. He's not the type of guy that I know he's gained bulk, and I know he's gained strength, but I certainly don't see him as like on 3rd and 1 that I want to hand the ball off to Demario McCall to try and plow over right tackle, to keep a drive going. It's kind of all right. Let's use him in the best way possible, and I think trying to isolate him and create mismatches, I think, is the best value he could give to the Ohio State offense.
Well, I think we know everything we need to know about 3rd and 1 when we hear so much talked about Ohio State practicing under center. Justin Fields is a big guy, and you need a yard. I think he can get you a yard behind those slobs up front.
I agree with you. That's a really good point, and it's nice to know that they're actually going under center.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Demario McCall, though, for me, I agree with you. He's probably not a 3rd and 1, 4th and 1 guy you would typically give the ball to. I think that what I love about running backs with maybe a little bit lesser size is that they can get lost behind those big offensive linemen and pop out the back when the hole isn't there. And McCall in the open field is just such a terror. I think that he's gonna be able to put up some big numbers in a backup role, and I think it would be a huge mistake if they don't throw at least one wheel route per game to him.
That's a really good point, because again, it's that mismatch that we were talking about, that he's very difficult to keep an eye on, because he's listed at 5'9", I believe, and I mean I'm not disputing his straight line speed. I've always thought, having seen him play, that yes, he's fast, but I think he's more agile. That lateral quickness that it's very difficult, in terms of, shiftiness, that I think, especially like you said, like on a wheel route, I think he not only could catch the ball, but then, make people miss after catching it. So I certainly hope that the coaching staff will take you up on that terrific idea of at least one wheel route per game next season.
One or more wheel routes per game, or we riot. Do you hear me, Ryan Day? Of course you do. Of course he does. Ryan listens to our show religiously. Um, the other thing I like is that, certainly no offense to Mike Weber, who was a decent enough receiver out of the backfield, but I think Weber and McCall are both pretty darn good receivers out of the backfield. I think they both have good hands. We've seen 2 or 3 at least, highlight one-handed catches by Dobbins out in space. And I think if you get Dobbins, you get McCall in there, I think it enables you to continue to use the entire playbook. I think it really helps Ohio State's offense that they can use the whole playbook for both guys rather than it almost seemed. You might correct you. Maybe you have a different view of this than I do, but it seemed to me like if Weber was in, you'd have a certain set of plays, and if Dobbins was in, you'd have a different certain set of plays.
I certainly agree with you. It seemed that way last season, and from what I've read, J.K. Dobbins has kind of rededicated himself to recapturing some of the magic that he had his freshman year, that he's kind of attacking this spring with increased vigor and intensity. So I think if they can use the same type of plays, regardless of who's in the game, it's that much more difficult for the defense to zero in on a specific player. Speaking of running backs, a guy who certainly looks the part, on that 3rd and 1. I'm not disputing or disagreeing with you that Justin Fields is kind of a big guy, and an even bigger guy who's taken full advantage of the off-season conditioning program is Master Teague, who certainly looks like he's had a steady diet of iron under Mickey Marotti's tutelage. He certainly looks like he'd be the kind of guy that on 3rd and 1, being able to blast for short yardage and probably more so. I think he's going to have an increased workload as well.
Mm-hmm. See, what I like about Master Teague's size and having him take some series as well, or take some snaps, is that it would enable, if Ohio State decides to run these sorts of plays, it would enable Ohio State to do what they really did a lot, very successfully when Braxton Miller was quarterback, and that's to run that big running back through that hole, have the quarterback follow him, and then the guy becomes the blocker. Zeke was also very, very good at that. So you would fake the ball to him, he'd go and he'd just destroy a linebacker, and the quarterback would follow him through the hole, and it would be an 8 to 10 yard gain minimum a lot of those times. So that's something I think that Teague could provide for Justin Fields.
Good point. Never thought of it that way.
I'm not sure how improved that J.K. Dobbins' blocking is, and certainly don't think that Demario McCall with his size is quite at that level either. So that might be something that Master Teague can add to get on the field this year.
And then, with the idea of Marcus Crowley's a true freshman, he's probably more along the lines of Demario McCall, but let's see if he does anything during the spring to kind of warrant getting a few carries as a true freshman, because Steel Chambers is going to arrive later this summer. So this is the time for Crowley, if he wants to kind of move up the depth chart and secure some playing time. I would certainly hope that during the spring he's doing enough to kind of warrant that consideration.
And I'll tell you this about Steel Chambers, Chip, and that is that if he, it doesn't really matter so much how his football career goes. He's missing an opportunity if he doesn't get together with some of his teammates after their collegiate career and create a musical group called Steel Chambers and the Silver Bullets.
Even if he can't sing a lick, huh?
Yeah. Well, they got auto-tune for that nowadays. The kids don't need to sing anymore.
That's true.
Even the ones that can sing end up auto-tuning the crap out of their stuff. So that's just how it's going. But maybe that'll all change between now and the end of Steele's career as a football player. All right, so let's look, Chip, at the defensive side of the football, and the talk of the spring is the bullet position. We're talking about the sort of a hybrid linebacker safety position. We've had the star position in the past. I think they called it the Viper up at Michigan under Greg Madison. What do you see in terms of this battle. It seems like it's Brendan White's position to lose, but it looks like they're going to play other guys there.
Yeah, I think Jocelyn Wint is also an opportunity for Jocelyn Wint to get on the field. He's not afraid of contact. That's not the issue with Jocelyn Wint. It's more of coverage responsibilities, as Ohio State fans discovered in 2018. Mm-hmm. So this would be an opportunity for him to be involved, have limited coverage responsibilities, but still, I think you're right. I think it's definitely Brendan White's position to lose, simply because I think he is the better cover man. He's also a very sure tackler. From what I understand, though, that Pete Werner is also still he's not necessarily being dismissed as an option, but I think you hit it right on the head that with this bullets position, and it's not something that Ohio State would necessarily use full time. To kind of clarify it, mm-hmm. If Ohio State's playing a spread team, or if Ohio State is in obvious passing downs, or these kind of things where, all right, to kind of give the opposing offense a different look, kind of pulling your traditional linebacker off the field and having the bullet play that, back and forth between linebacker safety type role. Brendan White certainly has my vote as being capable of doing so.
Yeah, I think Brendan White's fine if he whether he stays at safety or moves to that position. The other good thing about having multiple guys practice in that position is that if you have a position group out on the field and you see a change and you want to make a change and change the defense, if you have guys out there that have played that bullet position, whether it be a Pete Werner, or whether it be Jocelyn Wint or Brendan White, or even one of the other linebackers, you can change your call, and it, you don't have to worry about we got to call timeout, or we got to try running somebody off the field before they snap the ball. The good thing is they're trying a number of people out there, and I think they're going to zero in on a few people that can do it. And I think even maybe Malik Harrison even played there a little bit in spring ball. But it's I know there's a lot of people out there that are not really high on Pete Werner, but here's a guy who he played safety, he's played linebacker, and now this hybrid would seem to fit his skill set. I mean, I don't think that anything can be taken from last year's defense. I think that there were serious problems with last year's defense. I think that a lot of the reason that there were problems with last year's defense are gone now, and that is that it seemed that Greg Schiano was making the guys think too much. Certainly they weren't getting support from their position group and Bill Davis. But most of the reasons for the problems have been identified and replaced. So this is a good opportunity for Ohio State to, bounce back and become the Silver Bullets of old.
And I think we'll have to see if another factor. I completely agree with you. I think that the last year's defense, they were not properly aligned. I mean, there were so many times where the linebackers were so close to the line of scrimmage, and they were thinking too much. All of those things. Another factor is hopefully the return of good health to Tough Borland. That I think a lot of people forgot. Like they would just kind of, he's slow and he's out of position. Well, yeah, he's coming off an injury to his Achilles and had missed the spring and wasn't fully healthy. So I think that spoke volumes about that Ohio State was trying, to kind of make do with a player that wasn't fully healthy, and they were overcomplicating their scheme. So the word so far out of the few practices that have taken place is that the defense is slowly but surely regaining their confidence, trying to become like the Silver Bullets of old. The players recognize that last year was not good. They want to get back to that reputation of being a stout defense, and it seems like the new coordinators are coming in, and even with the new bullet position, kind of making things a lot simpler and allowing the players to just kind of run to the ball and make plays.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't just foot speed, slowness. The team played with a slowness on defense that was partly it was slowness to react. It was slowness to recognize what was going on, and then once you've had that delay, it really doesn't matter what your foot speed is. You're not going to make the play. So, if you had blazing fast, Ryan Shazier types and that kind of guy, across the board on defense at linebacker, those guys can run down plays if they're a little slow to diagnose. But if you don't have the blazing fast guys, which most teams don't have blazing fast linebackers, if you spend that second or two after the snap trying to figure out what's going on, then you've already lost the battle.
Speaking of blazing fast, and this kind of made me think of this, is I believe Baron Browning, when he was in high school, I thought he played both linebacker as well as I think some defensive back. So I know that Tony Gerdeman and Tom Orr had said that Baron Browning was needed to kind of pick up the defense better, but I'm kind of wondering if Baron Browning is even in the discussion as a possible bullet candidate based on where he played and how he played in high school.
Yeah, and I know that he was a guy that I think fans wanted to see him on the field more, but I think they didn't see him on the field more because he wasn't reading the plays as well as Tough Borland, and he wasn't making as many plays as he should. And here's a guy who kind of he really needs to put it all together. He's one of those guys that's kind of been on the edge of breaking through but hasn't quite done it yet, and it would be nice to see Baron Browning put all the pieces together and have it all click for him and have the game slow down for him this year. That would be probably at least just that alone would probably make Ohio State's defense 20% better.
I think one of the big problems, and we kind of touched on this indirectly when we were talking earlier in the podcast about Blue Smith, is that all of these players on Ohio State's roster, I mean, they were and are excellent football players. And in Baron Browning's case, he was so athletically talented coming out of Texas that maybe he had the opportunity to just kind of freelance and just do and go wherever he wanted, or if he could get to the ball, so be it. And this happens not necessarily year after year at Ohio State, but you hear about these guys that were highly touted recruits and they're not able to make a dent on their respective team's depth chart. So like you said, the fact that he's so athletically talented but wasn't reading the plays as well as Ohio State needed him. So, like you said, this is a crucial spring for Baron Browning in terms of taking that next step to becoming a bigger contributor for Ohio State's defense.
Yeah, I mean, guys that are freak athletes in high school are, they never really need to learn the technique in some cases, and sometimes sometimes they just don't have the coaching staff that's equipped to teach them the techniques that they need to learn. I mean, if you take a guy like Chase Young and put him in high school, he's just going to dominate no matter, even if he doesn't know what the play is. I mean, he's just going to, from raw ability, he's going to toss three guys aside and go get the quarterback. And, it can be, sometimes when things come too easy, you don't have to, improve your game. You don't have to improve your craft. When things come too easy, that's why a lot of A students get bored and their grades start slipping, right? Because they're in class and everything's coming real easy for them. They don't get good study habits. And then when things get a little harder, they're either not prepared to, on how to prepare for their tests, or they're kind of tuning out because they're used to just showing up on test day and just acing everything. So I think that's a good analogy for some of these athletes that Ohio State brings in, is that they're not equipped to take that next step because they've never really been forced to learn the little subtle things that make you truly great. Now, the great thing about a Nick Bosa is he had Joey Bosa coming home at Thanksgiving and Christmas and showing him all the things that Larry Johnson showed him, and he got a good head start. And also, he's pretty darn good. But some of these guys, they're just out there playing, and they're just getting told, hey, go get the quarterback, or this is going to be a running play, so just go get the running back. As soon as it's handed off, just go get that guy. And they're good enough to do it because they're just that good of athletes.
And you have to wonder if the latest freshman phenom in Zach Harrison, if he had that same kind of an experience in high school where he was just so physically dominant that in terms of developing more than maybe a single, speed rush move, for example. Does he have other pass rush moves? With the saving grace is that, number one, he's being coached by the best defensive line coach in college football in Larry Johnson. And number two, Ohio State has a very solid defensive line depth chart. So Zach Harrison, not that he can necessarily just kind of take it easy, but the pressure shouldn't be on him that, you have to go out there and become as dominant as Nick or Joey Bosa per se. It's the kind of thing where he can learn from Chase Young, and he can learn from the other defensive linemen on the roster, while also trying to get better and better every day.
Well, the other good thing is with a guy like that is he comes into spring football and enrolls early, and he's going to get that any notion that he's going to be able to dominate the way he did in high school just from a physical standpoint will be dispelled pretty early on.
Mm-hmm.
So we are looking forward to seeing how this bullet position shapes up. Obviously, we've learned one thing: you don't need to be a really fast player to play that type of position, because we saw Jabril Peppers play that position. He couldn't even run down JT Barrett from behind. So you don't have to be super fast.
No, you don't. The one thing I will venture a guess, though, that Al Washington, the new Ohio State linebackers coach, that he certainly will take a faster guy than Jabril Peppers if given the opportunity to do so.
I just never get tired of just thinking of that play where JT just ran 20 yards down the field about 3 steps ahead of Jabril Peppers the entire way. And I just still get a kick out of that, Chip. I don't know why.
I know why.
All right. Well, Chip, I think those are the main stories that I kind of wanted to touch on in terms of football for this episode of the Silver Bullets podcast. But before we get out of here, we would be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about the men's basketball team and how kind of a team that really was lacking in not only talent but depth in some areas, was not only able to make the Big Ten, the NCAA tournament, but also advance and pull off an upset over the Big 12 champs in Iowa State. And it's disappointing that the game against Houston didn't go a little bit better. Obviously, everybody, you get to the postseason and then people start to kind of believe and get that hope up, and you look at them coming in against Houston and you think, well, it's Houston's not a big school, it doesn't have the notoriety Ohio State has or whatever, and you start thinking, oh, here we go, this is a chance, and then people get bent out of shape about all the turnovers, but Ohio State did that literally all year long. Double figure turnovers. As many as 20 turnovers in a game was not that unusual. Very careless team with the ball. And it's not that they're even poorly coached. It's just that this team is not at the level where Chris Holtmann wants his team to be yet. And basically they lost an entire recruiting class to transfers. So, and then, you could even go a little bit back further to Thad Matta, maybe not doing a great job, or him and his staff not doing a great job of recruiting the last few years he was there. So this is something that is going to start turning around. Chris Holtman's getting better recruits. They're going to be coming into the program. Better players should mean better results, especially when Chris Holtman has been able to do what he's been able to do with what he's had to work with. So a good season for Ohio State, getting to the second round of the NCAA tournament. Sure, it would have been great to pull the upset against Houston and go play Kentucky, because as I tweeted out the other night, Kentucky owes us a night where one of their top players goes inexplicably ice cold and allows the lesser team to advance into the next round.
In the interest of full disclosure, when it comes to my interest in college basketball, I am one of those fans who gains more interest in college basketball as it gets closer and closer to the tournament. Mm-hmm. So I would not be the most educated person in terms of being able to speak intelligently about Ohio State's deficiencies this year. I do know that Ohio State kind of down the home stretch kind of was limping as it got closer and closer to the tournament time, and it was absolutely crucial that Ohio State won their game against Indiana in the Big Ten tournament. That kind of solidified their berth in the NCAA tournament. I know they gave Michigan State a really good game in the second game before they were eliminated. So I completely agree with you. I think Chris Holtman has this team primed for bigger and better things next year with talented recruits coming in. It certainly seems as though Ohio State basketball is pointed in the right direction. On Friday night, just to kind of share with you and our listeners, Friday night I was actually at a Cleveland Cavaliers game with my son. He's a really big NBA fan. Mm-hmm. And even though LeBron James is no longer on the Cavs, I have to respect the fact that my son, wanted to go to this Cavs game. So we went, and the Cavs lost on the last play of the game to the Clippers and all that. And when I came home, I was fortunate enough to be able to watch the final 10 minutes or so of the Ohio State-Iowa State game, and it was a great game. Chris Holtman certainly had his team scrapping and clawing the entire way. It's unfortunate the way that everything turned out against Houston, but as I said a moment ago, I know that Chris Holtman has this team pointed in the right direction, and I think the 2019-2020 season for Ohio State basketball is certainly going to be much more exciting than this past season was.
It was a good effort in the tournament. I love the grit and the scrappiness that they displayed against Iowa State. They made life very difficult for Iowa State. Houston had a fantastic game plan, and they played it very well on the defensive end. They were not going to let anybody beat them inside. They were double teaming everything that came into the post. And credit Ohio State for hanging around in that game and even leading part of it, for hitting 3-pointers. And this is not something that the team is particularly good at, and they were able to hang around because they did a good job of doing that in the game. A couple of fewer turnovers here or there, and maybe a call or here or there, they might have been able to even been in the game the final few minutes instead of the whole second half was it was a 9-point deficit. They'd pull within 5, then they'd go back up to 9 or 10, then they'd pull within 5, and it was just kind of a yo-yo in that thing. And they had a chance from the free throw line to get it to 4, and the second free throw was missed. And then you just kind of felt like you're never going to break that 5 for whatever reason. It's just not happening, and it didn't. The rest of the game was more than 5 from that point on. But a tremendous amount of fight from Ohio State's basketball team. You could see how much the seniors cared when they were pulled off the court on Sunday, and it's never easy to see an athlete go out like that and full of tears and unfulfilled aspirations. But the reality is only one team gets to leave happy at the end of the year and leave the tournament with smiles. But Ohio State's certainly can hold their heads up high.
And I think that they represented the Big Ten in the tournament very well. The Big Ten, I think, is kind of by the performances of other teams in the conference, but Ohio State included, has kind of made people realize, that the Big Ten, when it comes to basketball, is certainly worthy of respect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought the Big Ten acquitted itself well the first week of the tournament. They, of course, 7-1 the first round. Wisconsin being the only team that lost, and then a tremendous amount of fight even from the teams that lost. In the second round, you had Iowa rallying from way down to force overtime against LSU, and before falling. Tennessee, I believe it was, that they played. And Ohio State, again, they were in that Houston game throughout the entire first half and deep into the second half before Houston was able to extend the lead and kind of Ohio State just ran out of energy and ran out of effort and they were just drained and gassed at the end of that game because Chris Holtmann definitely had a short bench in those two tournament games and he kind of had to. It was just not Kyle Young was dealing with injury and had been for weeks, and there's only so many minutes he can give. Other guys were not getting the job done when they were getting their opportunity, so he was just putting his best out there and letting them play and fight. And they pulled one upset. They just couldn't pull the second one. But when you're talking about an 11 seed against a 3 seed, there's no shame in bowing out in that situation.
Completely agree.
All right, Chip. Well, I think that is going to put a bow on the Silver Bullets podcast for this time. I think we can come back and talk about the spring game. Maybe we'll come back before the spring game if there's some other things we want to discuss. But we'll certainly come back after the spring game, the week after. If we don't do a preview, we'll come back the week after, and we'll wrap that up and talk about any other news coming out of Ohio State. And I think then we'll probably go to a monthly kind of off-season schedule or an as-needed off-season schedule, I think maybe a better way to put it, and go from there. And I'm really looking forward to getting to the spring game because that means that now you've got some time off. You can start preparing for the 2019 college football season, and it's another step in the process of getting us toward our next year of Buckeye football. So that's kind of how I think we were going to approach this. And in the meantime, we definitely want to thank everyone for listening to the Silver Bullets podcast. We urge you to go over and listen to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. It comes out every Wednesday with Tony Gerdeman and Tom Orr. They do a really nice job. And I believe the Sloopcast guys are still regularly putting something out. I think the Sons of Schmidt are on hiatus, but I think you can listen to all our programs at the Ozone Radio Network, and I think you won't be disappointed.
Completely agree with you there. Great stuff.
All right, Chip, where can people find you on the internet?
On Twitter, I can be found at Chip Minnich, Minnich, and I haven't been writing during the off season, but I do write for the Hayes and Cannon section on the ozone.net, and I'm also a contributor for Athlon Sports.
All right. I am at Mike36fan on Twitter. You can also find me at Hayes and Cannon on the ozone.net. But like Chip, I haven't been writing much this off season. I will probably put a grumpy old Buckeye together for the spring game. That ought to be fun because nobody really takes the spring game too seriously. And I do not write for Athlon because they didn't call me up and say we want you to write and we're going to pay you. So I'm not writing for them. I'm available, Athlon. Anyway, that'll do it for the Silver Bullets podcast. We will be back to discuss the spring game. Until then, nothing left to say, Chip, except go Bucks.
Go Bucks.